Bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The Cinik Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Agree?
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
You know, that's been our opening now for almost 2 years, and I still never get tired of hearing it. That Cinik guy almost sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And this is episode 155 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I'm your host, Cinik. And joining me, as always, my good friends, Adrian and Ryan. And on this week's show, we're going back to a simpler time, 1996, before you could poke a random stranger on the internet and not get arrested. The internet was still kind of a fairly new concept, and the world was taken by storm by one of the first ever celebrity sex tapes. Pam Anderson, who couldn't have been hotter at the time, and Tommy Lee changed not only sex, but boating forever. Somehow, it got out into the world, and the people at Hulu, 20 or 30 so years later, have given us 8 episodes to talk about it. So let's do that. But first, before we get started, I mean, we've been off for, I'd say, 2 weeks, guys? And a lot's changed in the world. First off, I guess apparently you can't be a comedian anymore without getting the shit slapped out of you. So let's talk about what happened between Will Smith and Chris Rock. IG, what are your thoughts?
Well, my initial thought is, what's happening? At every award show, all of them, I mean, Grammys, Emmys, even the Tonys for Broadway, some comedian gets up and makes fun of people who are present or people that did incredibly stupid things like Harvey Weinstein. It's widely known, and really the biggest trick is, if you're not there, you're probably not going to be mentioned unless you're monumentally stupid. But if you're there, you're open game, and that's what comedians do, and that's what comedians have done forever. As long as I can remember seeing award shows, that's what's there. It's part of the entertainment value of the show. It's to keep the audience at home interested as well as the people that are in the theater. Having someone accost a comedian for telling a joke that wasn't even that bad, because if you look back at past award shows, Ricky Gervais would just beat the hell out of people verbally, and nobody even gave him a side glance. But for whatever reason, Will Smith is having a bad day and decided, I'm just going to go hit him in front of God and everyone. He didn't even wait to get off stage and yell at him. Just right there in front of everybody, get up and hit him. And that sets a bad precedence. If people are going to get up and hit comedians for talking, this whole cancel culture and censorship movement that's going on is going to get way out of control.
Ryan, do you think there's a little bit of irony that the probably most mild joke that Chris Rock ever told got him hit?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know if irony is the right thing. It was just kind of a bad, it was a bad, not a funny joke. The whole thing, it's funny. I consumed so much of it the week after it because it's just such a weird thing. But I think there's there's more there with Will Smith. I think he's kind of tired being the butt of jokes, recently, and there's probably a lot of other, issues that we're not privy to. But you don't do that. You don't get violent, especially in context. I think it's one thing if you're out at a, you're out at a bar with your wife and somebody accosts her or says something inappropriate, that's a little bit different. But when you're a celebrity at an event where people get made fun of, on a regular basis, and the joke was not even the worst joke, of the show directed towards you and your family, that just doesn't make sense. And it sets a really dangerous precedent. And I mean, we live in a world where people just act based on the actions of and words of celebrities, this I am afraid that there's gonna be a situation where comedians have to worry about, being, attacked on stage. And I do think Chris Rock handled it amazingly. I think it really shows, him as a professional and the control he had over himself and being able to control the room like that, both before and after. And he comes out of this looking great, and I think, it sucks for Will Smith. I think there's a lot more there. And, I mean, there's just, it's just bizarre. It's kind of hard to really fathom that something like that would have happened.
Well, here's the problem. Will Smith is not only an actor, but he's an athlete. He's in great shape. I mean, if you saw him in Ali, you have to say that the guy knows how to throw a punch, but he also knows how to pull a punch. And yes, I don't think that he hit Chris Rock as hard as he possibly could. He didn't slap him probably with 20%. He went up there to make a statement, and unfortunately, he made it. I mean, if he wouldn't punched him, and then that definitely would have been arrestable, and probably would have knocked Chris Rock out, because there is a distinct size difference between the two of them. However, to the people that say that it was fake, Will Smith took, which was probably one of the most golden careers in Hollywood, and threw it on its head. Because no matter what came before or what happened post-slap, this is always going to come into the conversation. I mean, his career it's going to be stained for the rest of his life. There is no getting away from it. He could cure cancer, and that's still going to show up in his A&E biography. It's still going to show up. The pictures of him slapping Chris Rock will never go away. So no, this wasn't done for publicity. It was done to save probably a failing marriage. And you're right, Ryan. He probably is a little tired about the jokes coming his way and the chatter, but it's his own wife that's releasing the details of their relationship, not anybody else. I'm not seeing Will Smith on the cover of Star or National Enquirer or even in TMZ. I see his wife front and center doing interviews, spilling the details about their marriage and their entanglements. So if there's anybody that really caused this situation, it's kind of her.
Yeah, and it's funny. I had a long argument with a friend of mine, one of my closest friends. Like, I'm the godfather to his kid. And not argument. I want to say we had a long discussion. It was probably an hour and change that we because he was convinced that it's fake. But the main argument to me, whether or not you thought the punch looked, as somebody who's fought and trained for a long time, it looked legitimate. Every movement looked legitimate, both on Will Smith's end and Chris Rock. But even if I grant it that they're great actors and they faked it, if you're Will Smith, that doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, that's the moment his career's led to, right? Like for every actor, that's what they want to give that speech at the Oscars. And there's no world where one of the biggest stars, in history, the one thing he hasn't done in his career, he's had 1 million #1 movies. He's been the big A-list action star. The one thing he hasn't done is given that speech at the Oscars for winning Best Actor. And to me, there is nothing in the world that Will Smith trades that for. There's no amount of publicity, there's no amount of money, there's no amount of anything that's worth giving up that moment in the Oscars. And so to me, it's it couldn't have been fake, because the chatter was he was going to win. He seemed like a shoo-in. Everyone was saying before he was going to win. There's no way you give up that moment if you're Will Smith. That will now for the rest of his life, it's that's tarnished. He won an Oscar, but he will never be able to think about that Oscar or look at that Oscar without the asterisk next to it that he slapped Chris Rock. And so I just don't. There's no way that's fake.
And he's threw away his opportunity to win another one for the next 10 years, unfortunately. But
he can win one. He just can't be there for it. So
then what's the sense? Just withdraw from consideration. But IG, let's look at it from Chris Rock's angle. He knew it was coming. He saw a much larger, angry gentleman marching on stage towards him. Do you think he thought that was the end result of what was going to happen? And can we give him kudos for not running away?
Well, absolutely. Standing there taking it the way he did, it speaks volumes about Chris, because not only did he stand there, take it, make a quick joke about it, and then move the show along, but, he didn't even really show that, it was a problem. And a number of other people, if they'd have been there doing that and that would have happened, there might have been a riot inside the theater. Chris Rock is a professional, and he's to be given all the kudos in the world for what he did. And he stood there, and my understanding is he's selling a whole lot more concert tickets. The prices are going way up. He's going to get paid out of this, and he's going to get a lot more opportunities because of how he acted. If he would have acted poorly, if he'd have reacted poorly and started saying bad stuff or running his mouth, or if he'd have just even walked off stage because that happened and just left, I think that maybe he wouldn't have had the response he's had. But he stood there and he took it and he moved on, and it shows what kind of a consummate professional he is. And on the flip side, Will Smith spent 30 plus years cultivating this image of a really nice guy. Everybody, like, you know, he looked funny, he looked personable, he was like somebody you'd want to go talk to. Cultivated this perfect image of, like, he was just really nice and really good to work with and really nice to be around. And that is gone. You know, talk about complete flip-flops, because, like, you know, you might think of Chris Rock, like, if you show some kind of weakness, Chris is going to talk about it and make fun of you. And Will seemed like the kind of guy who might make fun of you a little bit, but then he'd, like, pull you in close, give you a hug, and you'd be best friends forever. Those roles are kind of reversed, and good for Chris Rock. And, you know, I'm sorry to say it because I've loved a lot of Will Smith movies, even Wild Wild West. You know, there's some stuff in there that I like to watch, and that's a terrible movie. But I'll watch it. But, you know, he's tarnished his image, and that's awful, but it's good for Chris. And I can't help but think, hey, good for Chris. I'm happy. I'm hoping that, like, he gets a bunch of other movie roles. Maybe they'll even remake this into a movie. You know, make some dramatization about After the Slap or something.
Well, I have empathy towards Will Smith. I do. Because we've all been put in that situation by a significant other at one point or another. Luckily for me, the couple times that it did actually happen was in high school. And I reacted much the same way. Now, it wasn't on that stage. It was in a cafeteria, you know. But I almost ended up fighting most of the varsity football team. But I did it. And I would have done it again in the moment. But now I've had discussions with whoever I'm with to, hey, don't put me in this situation. If anybody, let me decide whether I'm going to react. Let me decide, which altercation I'm going to get into. Don't do it for me. And that's what Jada really did. And at the end of the day, if you want privacy, don't give interviews about your relationship, especially if you're not living, the vanilla life. If you're going to be risque and you're going to go out and do things that are questionable and it's not for public consumption, don't share it with the public. All right, IG, let's get into let's get into it a little bit. Let's talk about this Pam and Tommy video and the show and the recreation and the whole deal. I mean, before watching the show to review it, were you aware of the video and had you seen it?
Well, of course I'm aware of the video. Like, I'm old enough, and I was working in tech at the time when it came out, so, like, I'm fully aware of it. I have seen it. I don't know as I repeat watched it, but, I was along with the rest of the world, and everybody saw it. It became household information. Like, it was on the Tonight Show. They talked about it. When things like that happen, people find out. People go look, and I was on the internet every day doing things and doing research because I was working for a video game company and looking up things and trying to find stuff to help our games along and seeing what's doing well and what's not. Now, there was no YouTube. There weren't just regular video sites all over the place to do things, but, there was obviously ways for them to get that information out. I don't think I was among the first to see it because I certainly didn't order a VHS tape or anything, but yeah, it came out and it was very widely known. And I think someone else in the office told me about it. So, like, yeah, it happened, and it happened fast, and it was like, wow, oh my God. Like, it was very surprising. Not only that, two very well-known people, because Motley Crue was pretty big at the time still, and Pamela Anderson was probably the biggest star on television just because, for whatever reason, even though I never watched Baywatch, scenes of her running around made it into other forms of media and other television shows.
Yeah, I can proudly say that I never saw an episode of Baywatch, and I probably never will. Ryan, let's talk casting. Which characters for you stood out and which didn't?
Let's see. I think they did a great job casting both the leads, Pam and Tommy. I think that their performances were really good. It's tough. I'm not a fan of of these types of shows and movies generally, especially when they're still relatively recent. I think it's hard sometimes for me to because I know what these people are like and what they look like. But I think they did a good job. I think the only issue was that Sebastian Stan wasn't quite tall. Either that or Lily James was too tall. But I think the height disparity kept bothering me. That like I know in seeing them in real life, there was a big they're pretty much, they look like in the show at least the same height. There's a big height disparity. But I think they both did a really good job. I thought Seth Rogen was Seth Rogen. He was good, but he's still Seth Rogen. Really like Nick Offerman as well. I think he's good in anything he's in. And I like the character for the limited amount of time he was in. So I think those are the standouts to me. But it's a really good and very very deep cast. And actually, a lot of people are like Taylor Schilling's in it. Didn't expect that. And there's again a really deep cast. And I think overall very well acted. Like I can't think of any performances that I didn't like. I just think again it was Seth Rogen playing whoever, but it was still Seth Rogen. So, but again, he's good, but he didn't become that character necessarily for me.
Yeah, I mean, Rogen excels when he's playing these semi asshole-ish creepy dudes. It seems like that's his niche. Don't make him the romantic lead. Make him the square jerk off that doesn't quite fit in anywhere. And he just excelled. I mean, Nick Offerman essentially played Nick Offerman. I love the performances by both the Stan and what's her name, Lily James, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I love the performances by both of them. I thought they really kind of nailed it. What do you think, IG?
It couldn't have been done better. I honestly, I don't know who you would replace those things with. I mean, I did find myself a couple of times, and maybe because the other show is so fresh, thinking, what's the Winter Soldier going to do next? But he still did a good job. And having, watched how Tommy Lee acts in public, through, TMZ and other things, it was pretty close, I mean, and, Ryan's right. Yeah, the height disparity isn't really there, but everything else was, and it was acted well. I mean, the mannerisms from Lily James as Pamela, it was kind of right there. A very innocent person who came from a very innocent place and is still, quite honestly, very innocent. And that's the thing that this show exposed, is what it did to somebody who really didn't do anything bad to anybody. As bad as Tommy Lee was, and as much stuff as he did in his career, wrecking hotel rooms and sleeping with groupies and doing whatever else he did, Pamela Anderson was a pretty nice person in general.
Yeah, she really did kind of seem like a babe in the woods at times, but then the most intelligent person in the room in other times. Like some of the things that she came out with, at least story-wise, it was like none of this would have happened if they absolutely would have listened to her. But we were talking before, you were aware of the video. I mean, IG, we're both children of the 80s. Did they do a good job recreating the 90s in the movie?
Yeah, they did, without trying to do it too hard, right? They weren't going into places with people wearing the hypercolor shirts and trying to do fancy 90s, is what I would call it, with the hopped up cars and everything else. The only person that had hopped up cars was Tommy Lee. Everybody else was driving a piece of shit. And, that's pretty accurate, because most of us, we're just doing our thing, driving a piece of shit car around, living our life. They didn't sensationalize everybody else, which is a standard Hollywood type thing, right? Everybody, you got to make it look interesting. You got to put them in nice clothes and everything. No, everybody else just dressed how the rest of us dressed, which is jeans, t-shirts, and some nondescript shoes. Because, even though Jordans existed, not many people wore them, because they were too expensive. Or in certain cities, you'd get robbed because you were wearing them, and they'd just steal your shoes. So I think the look and the feel of it was really probably, mid to late 90s. It was pretty accurate, especially when they started talking about grunge coming around. You'd see a few of the grunge people running around in the show. It was accurate, and I really appreciated that, because I distinctly remember what things looked like and how things felt at the time, because I was an adult. I'd already been in the military and everything by that time.
Way to age yourself. Ryan, overall, who do you think the winners and losers in the story were?
I don't know that there are any winners, really. maybe Tommy Lee, like long term. Like if you think whose career was affected, because I think the show goes a long way to show that Rand did not make out well, ended up having to be basically forced to be like an enforcer. I think from what I understand, I read a lot about it later. It seems like he's done fine in his post life career. I think Tommy Lee did fine. Like I don't know that his career was any worse off, if not brought him into the limelight. I think maybe Pamela Anderson was probably the one affected, a lot. She was probably negatively affected because I think it seemed like she had a fledgling career. She already had a big, huge career, but I think there was, hopes of a larger movie career. I think that probably, tarnished her image more than it tarnished, wrongfully, but looked worse on her than Tommy Lee. So I think she was affected negatively. So I don't know that anybody in this entire thing comes out, winning or well. I think everybody, except for Tommy Lee's probably in a worse place than they would have been. And again, not that they're in a bad place. Like, sure, Pamela Anderson still had a great life, but or has had or is having a great life. But I don't think that anyone really came out all that great in this one in the aftermath.
I mean, she is really climbing down the rock and roll ladder. I mean, it was Kid Rock, and then it was this one, and in terms of the story, I thought that Pamela came across as a sympathetic figure. She came across as a lot more intelligent than she's portrayed, at least in the media or via the writing and the projects that she's done. I don't fully believe that she would have had this big movie career if it wasn't for this. Yeah. But at the same time, I did feel for her at times. I did feel for that nobody would listen to her, and what if we would have? I mean, eventually that tape would have circulated everywhere, and especially today with the way things are, nothing ever dies. It just gets recycled, and I mean, Jesus, we couldn't even put Rick Ashley to bed for the last 10 years. You never thought I'm never going to give you up. You would hear that ever again, and now you can't get away from that song. IG. Ultimately, though, I mean, we saw what Tommy Lee did to Rand. Can you blame him for stealing the tape? Can you blame him for going back and getting his pound of flesh?
And that's the thing. Like, you have a contractor, you have people coming to do work, even if it's coming to mow the lawn. If somebody mows the lawn, even if it's not great, you have to pay them, right? If you didn't examine the work beforehand, if you didn't lay out things, like, regardless what happens, you have to pay them. Maybe you don't have to pay them as much. Maybe you hold some back, and then you get some kind of mediator to do something. But to just go, no, and you can't have your tools back? Come on now. That'd be like me showing up somewhere with a laptop to do some computer work for somebody and everything, and then they hold a gun to my head and I got to leave. They're not going to pay me, and they're going to keep my laptop. It just doesn't make any sense, So expecting to get away with that and expecting nothing to happen, releasing the sex tape, wrong idea. Taking all the other stuff, you deserved every inch of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely, I agree with you. But can you, did you get a little bit of a chuckle, Ryan, out of his sheer anger of people bootlegging his stolen videotape when he walks through the tower parking lot?
That part's hilarious. Like, I can understand. It's one of those, like, I'm sure we could all, sympathize with him while also realizing he's an asshole and a bastard and kind of deserves that. But yeah, it's hilarious. Like, here's a guy who was wronged. His retaliation was not right, but then puts a lot of work in it. I think also there's a lot of fear involved there, because he is working with a mobster and there's a lot of money involved, and it's one of the first. One of those, really, was an innovator as far as the internet's concerned, and to have somebody basically just undercut him and pull the rug out from under him, it had to not feel good, but you reap what you sow.
I don't know in a world where he couldn't have imagined that, hey, somebody's going to just start making copies of this thing and selling it for less, on a street corner, the guy in the tower parking lot's not worried about Tommy Lee coming to find him. So IG, when I was selling you on this project to watch and review, it was eight short episodes, but was the lemon worth the squeeze? I mean, was it the right amount or was it too much?
I think it was the right amount, maybe a little bit long, but I don't know what you would cut. Honestly, like you have to know what everybody's mindset is. You have to know where they're at in their life, what's going on. So like there really isn't a lot of excess meat on the bone. So if they'd have gone longer, I think it'd have been too drawn out. I mean, they were a little bit longer than you sold me on because most of the episodes were 45 minutes or longer, but that's okay. I got through them all pretty quickly, and it was entertaining to watch. And, that's the thing is, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and our world has enough entertainment going on in it that there's still stories to be told. Not everything has to be based off a Shakespeare play or things that were already written. Like, there's enough crazy nonsense happening in the world that we've got stories forever. And this was an interesting one to tell, especially like getting some of the other sides and understanding like how much this did to Pam, really. Like, because while Tommy Lee kept saying, I'm on the tape too, like it's doing things to me too, like she's absolutely right. He's not a woman. Like, he'll be looked at positively and she'll be looked at like she's a slut. And she obviously wasn't, it didn't, at least according to the story, it's not showing that she's been doing a bunch of other things or running around Hollywood sleeping with everybody, at least at the time. So,
well, and he kind of slut-shamed her, too, because he's like, well, it's not anything they haven't seen before because she had been in Playboy, which sucks. And I had this question written a little further down, but since you brought it up, IG, I'm going to jump to it. Do you think Tommy Lee actually cared about the tape, or was it more, much like Will Smith, just peer pressure from a spouse?
I think it was a lot more of that. I think if things had been received more positively, or if Pam had been like, so what? Then he'd have been like, hell yeah, like everyone gets to see my giant hog. Like, he'd have reacted much differently, but he needed to be angry and upset about it because she was angry and upset about it. And, honestly, those kind of things happen, and I understand that. But, you see him at one point in the show, like, kind of down laughing with people at the bar in Vegas about the stuff, and that's just not the right position to show when you've got these things going on. So Tommy Lee has kind of always been looked at like a dirtbag, and this just kind of solidified some of that procedure going on, right? He's not a complete dirtbag. He's not as bad as everyone thought he was. If you go that this show is factual, which I'm sure there's sensationalization to make it more interesting for television. If they went straight facts, it's not that interesting. But if the show is factual, he's a dirtbag, but he's not as big as we thought, but he's a dirtbag. And sometimes, you reap what you sow. And like he's a charming dirtbag because he's able to lure Pam in with just being himself, but doesn't change the fact that he's a dirtbag.
All right, Ryan, let's talk about the big shock value scene in the whole 8 episodes. Now, I'm sure as men, we've all had nonverbal conversations with our penises, pep talks before big games and such. But after seeing that scene, did you worry that might have been an ongoing theme where not only did we get to see the fake penis, but we also got to hear it talk?
It's going to sound bad, but I was expecting and wanted more. And so the fact, because I heard about it, and I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And it happens for that one scene. And I wish it was given more I wish it was more cartoony, because it was basically like, I thought like it was a cartoony looking, prosthetic, and it wasn't. It would just look like it looked like a dick, but that was moving around and talking. So I was a little disappointed because it wasn't as ridiculous as I thought it was going to be. It was just kind of like a normal thing, but it was moving around a little bit and talking. In reality, it was probably perfect, and that was good enough. I was expecting more, and I thought it would have been funnier, but I guess it was probably good where it was. It would have made it a little more fantastical and ridiculous.
And that does it for Ryan George, and this will be his last appearance on the Cinik Radio. IG, do you think Pam Anderson honestly would have had a career, like a big movie career after Baywatch, despite the tape?
Not really, and I guess the reason I think not really is because nobody else really did either, right? David Hasselhoff had a career prior to Baywatch, and he had a little bit of a career after Baywatch, but like, who came out of Baywatch like a shining star and like has been like nonstop visible all over everything? Like, nobody. But they've all made a nice little niche out for themselves and made a good amount of money on Baywatch because it ran for a long time. But nobody really pulled it, and she was by far not the greatest actor on that show. Like, not that she was a bad actress, but she was nowhere near some of the other people, which is why most of the stuff she was shown doing was running on the beach rather than actually speaking or doing something.
Yeah, no one was holding this great actress down. She probably was never going to win an Academy Award. Even TV shows were harder for her to come by. I think she might have gotten to Borat for a little bit, but then after that, I mean, it was grand opening, grand closing. Ryan,
one thing with the like, I feel like the show tried to make it seem as if there was a career there that she lost out on because of the tape, and that is the thing I was thinking. It's like, okay, maybe there were some opportunities that she missed, and maybe she would have been given some chances that she didn't get. But it's like she's never been a good enough actress to like be to get any meaty roles. She's not going to win an Oscar or anything. So I think it's like maybe. And I don't know how much of it is dramatized, but maybe she did lose out on some opportunities because of the tape and because of the chaos. And I can imagine that publicists were freaking out about it. And on some level, it probably helped her career because of the notoriety. But then on other levels, it's gonna be hard to take somebody seriously like that, and especially with the sexism, that exists, now, let alone then. I could definitely imagine that, that she lost some opportunities. But it's like I don't think she's winning any Oscars anytime, and I don't think she's missed out on any Oscars.
No, I mean she was beat out by Elizabeth Hurley for Austin Powers. I mean, and Elizabeth Hurley didn't have the A-list celebrity status at that point that Pam Anderson did, at least as far as being known. And no way she's touching Kim Basinger in that other movie. I think there was an unrealistic expectation there. IG, why do you think that we run towards toxic relationships? You saw her at the bar when she first met Tommy Lee, and she's like, I'm not going to date any more bad boys, lawyers, and doctors from here on out. Second he shows up and starts raising hell, she's all about it. Why do you think people do this when they know somebody's so plainly bad for them, they end up in a relationship with them?
I think it's really just about the excitement, right? The one thing that those bad people have is they're exciting. They're always doing something. They always have something going on, right? A normal guy like us, we spend 5 nights a week sitting at home, watch a TV show, have some dinner, and go to bed. Those guys are going to go out to bars all the time, and they're going to go racing around the city. They've always got someone calling them, let's go do stuff, because they can't just sit at home. They have to be doing something all the time. And I can see the allure, right? If you find, like, the bad girl thing isn't really a thing where they're doing the same kind of stuff, because we as men don't want that, but women want to be able to be seen and go out and do things and have people see them and just have a good time all the time. And bad boys, more than the rest of us, are always doing something. And especially if you're like a rock star, like your plate is unlimited. You can just go, and like you can show up somewhere unexpected and be let in and be invited to the party, because those people being at your venue, like if you show up to some exclusive club and you're Tommy Lee in the 90s, they let you in. That's publicity, right? That's going to get them more views. That's going to get them more things going on. So, it's just, that's where the allure is, right? Even if he wouldn't have been running around with a monster hog, although I'm sure that's something that helped, it's the allure that he's got money, he's got time, he can do whatever he wants whenever he feels like doing it.
All right, before we go into final comments and ratings and everything else, I'm going to throw out a extremely uncomfortable question and see if you guys bite. Either one of you want to admit to ever making a sex tape?
We live in a world with technology, baby. Who hasn't done at least a little something, right? Taking out the phone, had a camcorder in the early 2000s. Like, you can't say nobody's never done anything, never taken a racy photo and nothing. Like, we need to be like, how much sex tape are we talking about? Are we talking Pam and Tommy level, or just even a little something? Because
little clip, long enough for Tumblr or maybe TikTok.
Yeah, like if Ryan says no, he's probably lying.
No, I honestly don't know. I can't think of it. I'm not going to say no because I don't know for sure, but I honestly can't think of it.
Yeah, I have.
I've always been deathly afraid of like anything getting hacked and just, even though it's like nobody knows me, so it's not like it's going to matter if anything did get out. I've just always been like deathly afraid of that. So that's something that like I would not want to do, or if I did, I would delete it immediately because I'd just be terrified of it finding its way on the internet, and then once it's out there, like it's there, it's in the ether, it's not coming back.
Well, I've done it. watched it and then said, well, this was a terrible idea. I know he's deleted it, but it was more for the person I was with and protecting them and not wanting them to be subject to it. I wouldn't care. It's my body. It's not going to change. I'm comfortable with it. So yeah, it's happened, and probably it'll happen again at some point and probably get deleted right after, like, oh, this will be hot. And then it turns out not being hot at all. I really got to hit the gym. All right. Despite their best efforts to suppress the tape, it gets out. They end up divorced. Rand becomes a legend of folklore. Ryan, would you recommend the show to your friends and family? And your final thoughts and rating?
I would recommend it to some people. Like, for example, actually, I had two clients today. One I recommended it to because I thought he'd enjoy it. One I knew would hate it, and said, "Yeah, I watched it this weekend. Don't watch it. You won't like it." It's interesting because I had no interest in watching it until you recommended it, and even then I was pretty skeptical. And I would definitely say I enjoyed the first couple episodes a lot more than I think I enjoyed the last few. I think that the issue for me was it was a little long. Like, I do feel like that story could have been told either in just a longer movie, like in 2 hours, or maybe a fewer episodes, or maybe 30-minute episodes. I did feel it dragged a little bit for me at the end, but it is a really interesting story because it's kind of like proto internet. That's the first really big internet scandal. I think we all remember that, and it was one of those. It was like the biggest story, and I'm a little bit younger than you guys, but I remember it being a huge
Thanks.
thing. And not that much younger, but a couple of years. But I do remember, for me, like, it being, a huge deal. I thought the cast was great. I do think the casting was really good, and everyone the performances were all great. Andrew Dice Clay's even in it. Yes, the casting they did a really good job. They did a really good job with the prosthetics and the fake tattoo. Can't imagine how much time they all spent. And there were times where I thought she was Pamela Anderson. So it was another thing that, like, they really did a good job with the makeup and prosthetics to make her, like, moments were like, oh wow, that's really her. Really looks like her. I didn't love, having again read a little bit more. I didn't love that it tried to redeem Rand. It seems like he was, look, he was wronged, but he's still a scumbag about it, and sort of make it seem like he was guilty when I don't know that he's ever actually expressed guilt was a little annoying. I also watched the, speaking of kind of documentaries about, shows about major scandals in the 90s, watched the one about the Bill Clinton Monica Lewinsky scandal. And I think the interesting thing about both of those is just, it's these situations where just how these women are raked over the coals. And I think that's the thing that really, it's amazing how, we're still not all the way there now, but how much better things are now than it was even then. And just the fact that you have this situation where, it's like, they're just treated like awful and treated just almost subhuman and made fun of, and that they had to kind of deal with it with this kind of like quiet, dignity, because there's not a world that, especially at that time, that would, was going to tolerate them, trying to fight for themselves. So I think, or not trying to fight for themselves, just treated them like sluts, and that was the end of that. Yet the guys that were involved in the same situation were treated completely different. So I think it is really illuminating about just the world that we lived in, the world we still live in, and that, look, we have made some progress. I think a scandal like that, goes over a whole lot different, and the way that the media handles it is a whole lot different. I mean, like the courtroom scene, not the courtroom scene, but the deposition scene was brutal. Like, that was one of those things that, that's just awful, and that she had to go through that is terrible. Like, nobody should have to go through that and be treated like that. So yeah, I think it really illuminated, or brought back to light just things from the past that really kind of sucked. And hopefully we have made progress, and we're heading in the right direction. I mean, as a show, yeah, I liked it. I would probably give it a 7.5. Like I said, it was a little long. If they were, there was an 8.5 somewhere there if they were to cut it, a little bit shorter. But overall, I did enjoy it. And again, certain people I'd recommend it, certain people not so much.
IG.
I think I'd recommend it to most of the people that I probably call friends, because they understand, even if they weren't into the sexual nature of the show, that most of my friends are closer to my age, so they'd remember the things happening, and it might give them a little bit different perspective. But I think the show was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't the best thing I've seen. It's not the best thing on television, but there isn't a lot of new stuff out right now, so like it's a good filler thing to watch while you're waiting for other things to come around, Stranger Things and other things that are coming hopefully soon, Obi-Wan. So spending some time watching this when you have nothing else to watch, like, it's not bad television. It's really well done. And, you know, I agree with a lot of what Ryan said, and like the world is changing, but the fact is like, as a parent of pure daughters, I only have 3 girls. I've had a lot of conversations with them, probably based off of my understanding of how this happened before this show even came out, about you need to be careful because people will view you differently just based on actions. Something that a guy can do and get away with and nobody's going to even bat an eye is going to turn you into something completely different. So shedding some light on that, maybe for some other people in the world that really haven't been exposed to some things, I think the show does a good job of that. The casting was great. I think the look was appropriate for the time. You know, showing that like Motley Crue's later albums were not received well was kind of hilarious for me, because, you know, once I got past, I think it was Dr. Feelgood, like most of the stuff did not do all that well. You know,
It's over, Johnny.
It sat on the shelf and didn't sell because there wasn't, they were trying to change their sound and everything, and it just kind of went downhill. You know, but that doesn't mean that Tommy Lee didn't still make tens of millions of dollars and could have easily paid the what was it, $37,000 total that he owed to these contractors. You know, in the grand scheme of things, in the size house and what they were doing in that house, that's a tiny amount of money, especially in today's money, but obviously in the 90s quite a bit more, but he had the money. I really did enjoy the show. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think I would be probably about an 8 for it. You know, it's watchable. It's really well acted. I mean, even like I wasn't even taken out of it by Seth Rogen, even though he was very Seth in the role.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I thought would be a complete train wreck actually ended up being an engaging and kind of interesting story. I absolutely would recommend it to certain people, like Ryan said and like you said, you know, coworkers, but not my mom. The whole cast was pretty amazing. I mean, hats off to Lily James, Sebastian Stan, Seth Rogen. I mean, they dug Andrew Dice Clay up. If there's anything more 90s than Andrew Dice Clay, just go ahead and shoot me. I think they all did a remarkable job telling the story. I'll give it about an 8. I mean, it could have been a little bit shorter, like Ryan said, but they were only 30, 40-minute episodes. And let's be fair. I mean, it was technically longer than Pam and Tommy's actual marriage. Now, on a side note, the guy that did try to kind of blackmail them into selling them the rights to the tape did get sued and lost his fortune, fled to Thailand, and never returned to America again, ended up shutting down his company. So I guess there is a little bit of justice there. I mean, guys, there is a ton of content coming up. We're in the middle of Moon Knight, which we're going to talk about shortly. Better Call Saul's back in a little bit, and I believe we got Kenobi right around the bend. And as of taping tonight, they are releasing Spider-Man No Way Home tomorrow. So that's already headed to my house via Amazon. We have a ton of stuff to talk about, so we're going to be back next week. We're going to break down some Moon Knight and see what else we can get into. So until next time, IG.
Don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at cinicradio.com. Available for download on iTunes.